Go through some quick intros here. My name's Corey Cicchini. I'm a senior sales director here at NetSuite with 17 years of experience here at NetSuite. I'll be taking us through the initial part of our presentation today, and I'll allow Jeff to introduce himself, who will take us through the meat and potatoes of today's webinar.
Thank you, Corey. I appreciate everyone taking the time to join today. My name is Jeff Haley. I lead the EPM and analytics practices over at Bryant Consulting. We'll give you a little more insight to who we are, what we do, and what we have to offer further in this demonstration. But I'll pass things back to Corey to get us kicked off.
Thank you, Jeff. We'll go through today's quick agenda, which we've already went through the introduction. For us to, we'll talk about what is NetSuite Analytics Warehouse. Jeff will provide some more context around Bryant Park Consulting. We'll go through the commission pitfalls as well as NetSuite Analytics Warehouse CommissionsPro and some takeaways. And we will have a Q&A at the end. So please submit your questions in the chat and we'll address those at the end of today's presentation. So we'll first start with what is NetSuite Analytics Warehouse. And essentially, this is an application that provides a data warehouse, a visualization tool, and an ETL tool, all wrapped up into one. So typically, if you were to acquire these particular technologies out there in the marketplace, you would be working with 3 different vendors. With our NetSuite Analytics Warehouse, often referred to as NSAW, you get this all packaged up into one application that is integrated to your NetSuite ERP environment. And we're going to focus in on a certain function within NSAW that's going to provide the commission calculations and management that many organizations are looking for today. And finally, NSAW is powered by Oracle's applications, part of our family, Oracle Analytics Cloud, Oracle Autonomous Data Warehouse, all wrapped up into one into NSAW, built for NetSuite customers with a pre-built integration included with that particular environment. Short presentation for me. We want to get into the commission management side of things, so I'm going to hand it over to Jeff Haley at this point in time.
Thank you, Corey. And for those of you who do not know Bryant Park Consulting, I do want to do a quick intro of who we are and what we do when it comes to services. We are an all things alliance partner for NetSuite. We focus in on the core ERP, from implementation, optimization, ongoing services, but also to all of the other ancillary softwares and solutions around NetSuite. That includes the Oracle package solutions. One of them we're talking about today with NSAW that extends into enterprise performance management with NSPB, NSAR, as well as some of the integration platforms that are now available as well. But at the end of the day, we focus on how customers get the most out of their investment with Oracle NetSuite. And that's really what we're here to do today too, in sharing some of the solutions that we have available to you all as a part of what NSAW can provide and extend to your core NetSuite investment. So I want to focus the conversation on these 3 primary pillars. The first pillar being focusing on how organizations are incentivizing their teams. That incentive process can vary drastically. So I want to talk through some examples in relation to how organizations are incentivizing across different industries, across different revenue streams as a part of that process. But also to how are teams operationalizing it? How are they executing on those incentives, the processes that go into actually doing the math, the calculation, the tracking, the reporting, the analytics at the end of the day, the reconciliation of that process as well. And then also to, last but not least, informing the team, those stakeholders, and making sure they're clear on how have I performed in relation to those activities. On the incentive side of things, I work with organizations across pretty much every industry, from products organizations, wholesale, distribution, retail, services, software organizations. The incentive process can vary drastically, largely driven by what are the KPIs that we are utilizing as an organization to incentivize our sales reps to go out and go above and beyond the targets that they have as we're looking at the next year, the next 2 years, as our organization continues to grow and as the sales team continues to grow and scale to drive that performance. Now, that incentive model can tie into some of the examples I show here: tiered models, revenue versus gross margin based calculations. That gross margin definition can mean a lot of different things depending on the organization, what's truly commissionable as a part of that process. Having quota-based targets, And typically with Codebase too, you're seeing certain accelerators depending on if and where they're going above and beyond in context to that quota attainment. Residual, recurring, quantity-based, hybrid models. We could go all the way into other aspects around commission splits, especially as you think of sales teams and organizations working, collaborating to help drive additional sales to the organization. That process can come in a lot of different ways. And that's the beauty of commissions in a sense when it comes to the creative nature on how we can best incentivize our sales teams. The other side of that coin is based on that creativity, how do I execute on that? Which can always be the challenge as well. And I would say that's where you're looking at the data. How am I capturing this information to have a system driven approach, logical approach on what I need to capture for those transactions, determining what's eligible versus ineligible? Is everything that's flowing through transaction wise going to be an eligible, commissionable transaction? Or as I have multiple revenue streams, lines of business, maybe there are multiple models that I'm having to run in tandem and delineating the activity across that by different product service lines, but also to getting the lines of business and other factors as well. Frequency, another one we see across a lot of customers on maybe there's a bi-weekly process, but maybe you have a spiff period coming up for a peak period, and you want to add an additional incentive for sales reps to go out there and help push additional opportunity to help bring more business to the organization. But at the end of the day, tying that back to something that's reconcilable. Managing that process can be very tedious and it can be error prone, especially if you're doing it manually today, where there can also be other functions that tie into exception management or clawbacks. No sales rep likes to hear that, but that's also the frank reality of a commission incentive process too, is making sure that we help close deals and we close deals efficiently and well, and that the team has the tools to be able to manage those exceptions when and where applicable. And as it relates to then kind of the final outcome and output is we've got a great outline on how we want to calculate and measure this performance. We have a process now defined to help do the math, create those calculations, produce those commissions, pay those commissions. But we also want to provide transparency to our sales team. Seeing that information just on a pay stub doesn't necessarily give them the level of confidence of how did I get to that number? Are there things that were included or excluded as a part of that ties to my performance? But also too, as you think of that as a sales manager or sales leader in the organization as well, understanding that performance and tracking that performance because that reporting and insight to that information gives better granularity, gives better traceability and reliability of data to build trust with your sales organization that they know they're getting compensated on everything that's relevant to the activities that they're signed up to help sell at the end of the day. Now, when it comes to the processes that I typically see organizations looking at to help manage this, first and foremost, manual. Manual is always there. Excel can be our best friend and our worst enemy at times. But the frank reality is, I see so many customers when it comes to complex, multi element commission models managing it in Excel today. All sorts of issues that can translate to in regards to how do I make sure it's traceable and reportable to those stakeholders? How do I make sure it all ties at the end of the day in context to the activity, how I'm posting the activity in relation to that process as well, to ensure that I have accurate and aligned commission calculations and payments to my sales organization. There's also third-party softwares. There are commission solutions in the marketplace that can help with these processes, but most of them still run into challenges, especially around integration. Not having it built for and around NetSuite is probably the biggest challenge I see for most customers as a part of that process, but also to typically the licensing model, especially if your sales organization is, you know, 20, 30, growing quickly. We have with customers that have hundreds of sales reps across the organization. That user model and licensing model is typically user based, which can add up very, very quickly when it comes to the cost. Where that has customers looking at NetSuite and saying, hey, NetSuite, what do you have to offer that can help us manage this process more efficiently, more effectively as a part of that approach? So the first solution that most customers are evaluating is NetSuite's incentive module. This is a module that can be deployed in NetSuite ERP. Foundationally, there are some key value points that this provides. It does provide some functions around being able to manage standard rule types, flat rate, um, quantity based, some quota attainment inputs. It can allow you to do some rules across some standard segmentation, having a commission record to be able to report out on some of that information, being able to have commission plans across sales reps. But I do see customers with that don't necessarily have this straightforward commission process running into how do I then manage this process? And I would say where I typically see them hitting that wall is around the flexibility they need for commission rules. Those commission rules are typically conditional or exception based. They need to be able to have product or margin specific rules. Margin being a big one. I hear a lot of margin use cases around how that commission needs to be calculated and what margin means in relation to that calculation too. But also having multivariable, the ability to have combining sales volume and profitability as some of those functions. One of the other use cases I hear too is I need to be able to split a commission. Maybe I have teams of individuals that are working on these and understanding what are their contribution inputs to be able to have that so you have dynamic weighting and flexibility in that calculation. The timing and triggering of those activities, right? When is this going to get paid? Is it going to be defined on a deferral schedule? Is it going to be milestone based as a part of that process? There are other functions also that tie into the timing of that, if it's based on an invoice or a cash receipt. Also, critical factors that customers don't have natively with that capability inside of NetSuite today. There are some other functions when it comes to reporting, some other functions in context of managing exceptions that I was mentioning with clawbacks and some of those adjustments as well. But at the end of the day, the challenge is scalability as we're looking at how and where those processes may be today, but also to where they may be going as you're looking at adding new lines of business, as you're looking at other functions to drive more levels of automation and accuracy in that process, which is why we have developed our Commission Pro solution within SAW. Commission Pro is intended to provide all that holistic foundational value of what NetSuite Analytics is providing, the full data warehouse, the data pipeline that's doing the replication of all of your NetSuite data to that database. It includes the business intelligence layer with Oracle Analytics Cloud, what Corey was talking and doing an overview over earlier. But on top of that, it's providing a commission engine. That commission engine is where you're able to manage more flexible commission rules tied to your transactions and the logic that's tied there, managing those commission plans, being the housing and source of that information in conjunction with those commission rules. We'll also talk about and show you some of the functionality around the exception management suite and the ability to have approval workflows tied to this process as it relates to reviewing and signing off on commissions, but also for those exceptions where you do have a clawback, or maybe we have a spot bonus or an adjustment we need to make as a part of that commission process. But at the end of the day, too, this also is built for and around NetSuite. Having that pipeline and that feed of data tied into this process natively is a huge value to customers and a time to value as you think of that in context of getting this set up and live on the application too. So just know those are the functions that tie into how this is utilized across not only the commission process for employees, for payroll as you're thinking of it too, but also how it can tie and integrate into NetSuite if some of your commission process may be tied to vendors in some of those use cases and being run through that AP process. On top of that foundational commission engine, there is also access to a portal. That portal is a capability that allows your sales team, your sales management leadership to be able to have secure access to relevant data for them. If I can only see what transactions are related to me or my team, I have that full security control through the Oracle Cloud infrastructure. But also, too, the beauty of this portal is it allows them to have self-service access to reporting, insight to that detail, and be able to manage commission dispute workflows, approval workflows, support processes, but it doesn't add any incremental user licensing for your sales reps and sales managers to be able to access that portal. That's a big deal as you look at that versus other commission solutions in the marketplace. So keep that in mind as we get into the application here in just a minute too, around as you're thinking of folks being able to self-service that information, gaining and providing more of that information to those stakeholders, that informed pillar we were looking at, that's a capability that's native as a part of what NSCW can provide with the Commission Pro solution. So just to give you a quick overarching kind of architecture view of the application we're talking about today, as I mentioned, NetSuite's at that foundation. You'll have that data pipeline, what information is tying into that Oracle database. On top of that, you will have a business intelligence layer. So again, this application is not limited just to NetSuite data. You can tie data in from other systems. We have clients who are utilizing this in conjunction with royalty processes and needed to tie in contract information, pulling data from CRM, other databases. As you think of data consolidation and how this can work better and more holistically across the organization for reporting and analytics, as well as the operational value we're talking about around commissions and some of those other functions as well. All those components tie into that commissions engine I was talking about. Again, in that commissions engine, that's where the rules reside. That's where we're capturing those inputs, the plans, exception management, as well as the administration, right? Those are the functions that we want to be able to enable the customers to own at the end of the day through the implementation process. But again, providing access to the relevant data for the relevant stakeholders through the commissions portal. That portal is still controlled through IDCS, part of the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure and Identity Cloud Service, but also to having package reporting, self-service reporting, as well as workflow process as well where applicable. And I'll talk through some of the use cases as we get into the demonstration. Just a reminder for folks before I go into the demonstration too, if you are starting to think of some questions, please do drop those in the Q&A as we're about to jump into the overview of the application too. So what you're seeing here is the commissions application. On this first view here, this is where you can see the dashboard. This is where I can have a standard set of visualizations, reports available to my stakeholders. They can see this dynamically across different attributes of the data by territory, by sales rep, by sales team. But being able to see this information and having that granularity and flexibility to look at this data more holistically is one of the key functions that customers are loving when it comes to the capabilities this provides on top of what NSAW has already natively as part of that process as well. Now, as I mentioned, this is a solution that sits on top of that database. So having all of the detailed transactional information I need to understand around our performance, tracking those KPIs, those measures for our sales team are critical. And within these views here, I can see this data where maybe I want sales reps to be able to come in and create their own visualizations off this data. They can create their own dashboard snapshots, team snapshots that can be shared as well. Some other functions where you can create another snapshot of this report, create and slice and dice different columns, rows, as you think of how you want to structure that reporting. And then that can also be downloaded and shared via CSV, via Excel, PDF. I can send it via email directly from this application at the end of the day. But also too, as we look at this information, this is all driven off of the data and the rules that are tying in the context of that process. Those rules allow me to have and define what are the criteria I want to be able to utilize for this process. So as we're looking at this example here, I have a class delineation that provides different differentiation between different lines of business in this example. But this would be aligned to your business and your segmentation as you think of what data elements are critical for us to delineate what activity is going to follow which commission process. In that commission process, we can define the commission type. That commission type can be one time. Maybe again, it ties back to more of a spot bonus, a quantity-based model. Maybe it's a weekly average. Other functions, again, that tie into what incentive model, what KPIs are we using to measure this performance and calculate these commissions accurately as a part of this process. So again, by having the flexibility to not only have those broken down here, but your ability to also create them directly within the application gives you a higher level of flexibility when it comes to administrating this process and adding automation to that process as well. Now, as it relates to those commission activities as well, I can see here a breakdown of different statuses for my commission, because we know just getting the data, calculating it, all those pieces take time in context to getting it reviewed, approved, steps before that, preparing it and getting it ready for that process, but also too in relation to a sales rep understanding when is this going to hit my paycheck as a part of that process, especially if it's not always just every other week, as we're thinking about a monthly basis, quarterly basis, depending on that incentive model. Having that flexibility to also provide that level of transparency is great. And that also ties into use cases where maybe it's an eligible versus an ineligible transaction. Because again, I can't tell you how many customers I've worked with where not everything is necessarily commissionable. There could be functions that are tying into other activity that isn't necessarily. So making sure you have that delineation, that visibility and transparency, that process allows your team to really understand what's driving their incentives and pushing them to drive more of that activity as well. On top of that, that's also where you can tie in that pay schedule. Can it be bi-weekly, quarterly, weekly, seen it all. When it comes to the different timelines of when those incentives are relevant, but also to the timing of when those incentive plans are relevant as well, which I'll talk about here more in a minute. So again, this is where I can break down the full payment schedules as we're looking at this process in relation to each of those commission inputs. This transaction view is nice because it does give me another snapshot of that transaction detail. I can see all the detailed transactions that I was commissioned on as part of this process. But also too, I can slice and dice this. I can look at it by customer. I can get into it at a product level in this example, down to the item level. I can see it by pay period, but I can also see that status we were talking about. I can see here, it looks like I have roughly 21 different transactions that are in a pending status. If there were any that were rejected, I see I have 6 that were rejected. I can take a look at those to determine why were these rejected. Asking the questions around that in context of understanding my performance and what I'm being measured on as a part of that process as a sales rep, sales manager, or sales leader. Now, as it relates to the process inputs, we talked about some of the rules that go into this. The commission plans are the other side of the coin. These commission plans vary based on those commission models. So in this example, I'm looking at one that's position based. Those positions may have different product groups that are associated as a part of that process. Tenure is another variable that we see sometimes in certain use cases for clients. Having targets, those tiers, right? As we think of the structure of the commission plan, but these forms are where you allow you to tailor those views based on the commission inputs you need to capture and the period those commission plans are relevant for. So in this example, I'm making one for this next year. It's going to be applicable for the whole year. It's a biweekly pay schedule, but I can see that broken down at the position level across my product category, the tenure, the targets that are set for this commission plan as a part of that process, so that I understand how these inputs come to be and the rates that are going to be applicable as I think of how these commissions will be calculated. Now, the other side of the coin I was mentioning earlier too is the exception process, right? So this clawback management view is an exception form where I can review and submit data to the application. Those are typically adjustments, clawback requests as a part of that process. Now, this isn't something that's provided access to everyone in the application, right? Only a very specific set of users are going to have access to this. But what this is doing, as well as by being able to come in here and create an example for this overview here too, is I can come in, add a row into this transaction table, add in any critical data elements I need as a part of submitting this request to this process. Can put in date information, client information, sales rep information, rate information as a part of those inputs. But as a part of saving and submitting that, I can trigger a workflow. That workflow will then submit that to the appropriate reviewer to be able to review that. And in this example, I received an email saying, "Hey, Jeff, looks like we got a request submitted to approve a clawback. Please come here and take a look to review that and approve that within the application." It'll give me a link. I can dynamically take me to an approval review form that allows me to then navigate and determine if I need more information or if it's good to go to approve or reject as a part of that process. But that applies to adjustments, those exceptions, those inputs, that process that we know come day in, day out as you look at a growing sales organization and changing process too. One of the other nice but simple features I would say as well is we want to have a schedule here that helps lay out the timing, the expectations of when sales reps can expect to get paid, especially when you have variable timing across different commission plans. So just know you have the flexibility to report on that information as well through that functionality within NSAW. And then the last form here I want to talk a little bit about is the commission request form. So this commission request form is also a place where sales reps can come in and provide a follow-up. Let's just say it's more of a support ticket when you think of it in its foundational nature. But the intention behind this form is I can look up a specific transaction. So let's say one of the ones we were looking at earlier where I had 6 rejected transactions in that table we were looking at. And I want to know more. I want more information. Why was this rejected? Or I feel like this should have been approved. What's the reasoning behind this? And so in this process, I can go in, I can find this specific transaction I'm referring to. There's a search bar up there too. If I know the transaction number, I can type that in. But as a part of that process, I'm inputting that transaction and it's already actively populating all the information related to that transaction, the amount, the client, the rep, all the pieces that were relevant for a reviewer to be able to look at in relation to that activity, as well as the status of that information. From there, I can determine a request type. In that request type dropdown, this is also where I can provide a predefined sub list of of types of requests I want to be able to manage. Is it a status request, a dispute, a missing commission in that process as well? This one's a commission dispute because again, I'm not quite clear why this one was rejected. I can add a description to this process. And that way, this can queue it up from a workflow perspective. If you want that to be routed to the sales manager to help respond, if that's going to be tied back to someone from sales operations or finance and accounting, you have the ability to manage that workflow as a part of that process. And by submitting that, then that gets queued up for review and approval as a part of that process to determine is an adjustment needed here based on the status and review of that information. So at a high level, that's an overview of NSAW Commissions Pro. Um, I think the key callouts that I would highlight as we're talking about this solution, and just to do a quick kind of recap of Commissions Pro and the value it's providing customers today, and potentially for you all, is helping you simplify complex commission processes. That operational layer, that pillar we were talking about, can be very tedious for accounting, for finance teams, but also to especially to give your sales team the creativity, the flexibility where they need to think about how do we incentivize our sales team. Executing on that can be a challenge. And so we want to be able to provide a better framework for the operational team to be able to leverage, manage that process more efficiently, incentivize those sales reps appropriately, and then also to being able to tie that in more effectively and having a solution built for and around NetSuite. It's something that's priced very competitively as we think of that in context to other competitors in the marketplace. Something we want to make sure we're helping bring to the market, bringing that value of that Oracle NetSuite technology.